This is the fifth Sunday in Lent. We are getting closer and closer to the experience in Jerusalem. And in the Gospel of John that we're looking at this week, and we have for the last several, it actually is just before Jesus goes into Jerusalem, has supper with his fellow disciples, the closest ones to him, and we never really see him again until the very public execution that he's going to experience on our Good Friday. The last chapter that we're dealing with here, 12, before 13 starts all that process, is the last time Jesus is really available to the public. That he's been bringing everybody to this point. Everybody's following. They don't like to have the idea that he won't be around, but he's preparing his people for that eventuality, knowing that that eventuality is very, very close indeed. So we start off with some Greeks coming. Now, it's Greeks is a kind of large term. It could legitimately be people from Greece. It could also be people who were just outside of Israel. They were all called Greeks because, the Romans were the really bad guys, the Greeks were the semi bad guys. They'd kick the Greeks out, so they could be a little more hospitable to the Greeks. Could just be people who were from a different tradition, a different history, different heritage, who had decided that the God of the Hebrews and the Tanakh, the Old Testament, spoke to them, and they wanted to be part of the community that had that as their book of worship, as their book of their gods. So we have these two people coming, and they talk to others who probably spoke the same language, and they ask, "We want to see Jesus." Now, I want to stop with that for a minute because it's actually a profound question. It's not just merely we want to see someone, have our picture taken, get an autograph, say we've actually been there. That's not the kind of thing that they were looking at. And that's not the kind of thing the early church wanted to emphasize when people came to Jesus. It's the Gospel of John. So there's no slow awakening to who Jesus is. This is right off the hop. We know who Jesus is, the Messiah. No apologies given, no concessions granted. He's the Messiah. This is what's going to happen. This is what he's here to teach, and moving along. That's the Gospel of John. So just before we're transitioning to his quiet time with his followers, we're here to see Jesus. Jesus never really answers, to the best of our knowledge. That's not in the scripture for sure, that Jesus actually stopped what he was doing or finished what he was doing and went to spend time with these newcomers. What we have, though, is Jesus pivoting. Maybe physically, but definitely content-wise. He does not talk directly to the newcomers, but he does talk to the people around him about dying so that you can have life. Now, on the surface, that's a really, really hard concept. It's contradictory. How can you die and have life? But Jesus was going a little bit deeper, and the metaphor that giving of the seed is so helpful in understanding, because Jesus was basically telling his closest followers and the ones who are listening, I'm going to be gone. This is your job to carry on. You're the one that's going to be answering these questions. You're going to be the one that is trying to explain to people who I am, what I taught, what we're about, why it's so important going forward, and why it's transformational. We're here to see Jesus is so much more profound than a simple meet and greet. It's the question so many seekers are asking. Where is Jesus? Where's Jesus in the church? Where's Jesus in our faith? Where's Jesus in our Bible? Where's Jesus in our politics and our music and our TV shows and whatever else that we pretend are Christian? Where's Jesus in all of that? The short answer is not visible, is it? Jesus is not in a lot of that stuff. Capitalism is in that stuff. Assumption of power is in that stuff. Control of others is definitely in that stuff. But Jesus is not to be found for the most part. Genuine seekers want to know Jesus. They want to see Jesus. They want to meet Jesus. We, as a church establishment, have let seekers down. And I will take as much responsibility as anybody else in my position on that one. We're not available to tell people who Jesus is. And so many of our church communities get caught up on the mundane, like, is the roof going to leak? Who's going to take care of the dinner or the lunch next Sunday? These mundane things that do not matter. Not that long ago, I was in a congregation and I asked them honestly, I said, Really, really drill down and see what your answer is on this one. Do you want to, A, have people following Jesus, go out there and change the world, social gospel stuff, or B, do you want to have bums and seats? Increase the congregation size, have more people showing up and putting money in the collection plate. Who do you want to be? You can't be both. And quite frankly, that whole bums and seats thing, that's dying. That's not going to be where you go. And of course, I didn't give them time to answer because that answer is going to be very uncomfortable and it's something they have to think about. It wasn't going to be something that we're going to be asking right off the hop. Because the reality is that we might want to be the followers of Jesus seeking justice, but we're comfortably being the bums and seats people who don't challenge anything, who just kind of take at will whatever is going to happen. Who is Jesus? Who do we tell about when we have seekers coming to say, I want to meet Jesus. I want to know Jesus. I want to understand what Jesus was about. The metaphor of the seed gives us so much to work with. Because anybody who has worked with seeds knows you can go into any gardening store. It's going to start soon if it hasn't already. And you'll have miles and miles of packages of seeds. And they're going to sit on the shelf or in the container or in the bag or whatever else. And they're not going to make a difference as they stay in that form. It's not until they are planted, when the pressure of the land and the nutrients and the water softens their shells and they crack apart. The vulnerability that's inside that the shell was protecting, the soft part, that's what grows up to be the plant. It's such an easier metaphor to work with than if you want to live, you first have to die. We can't really work with that as well, but we can work with the seed. When we are asked to show people Jesus, we're not asked to talk about Christ the King. That's a relatively recent invention, quite honestly, and it's played on too much because Jesus never had any inspiration, any aspiration to be a ruler in that regard. He brought a world that was different, that was changing. That's what he was about. And that's what we have to show people who are looking for Jesus. Not someone who's in power, not someone who is judging. Heavens to Betsy, not someone on a throne looking down. That's Zeus, by the way. It's not God and it's not Jesus. We've got to show them that vulnerability inside a seed, that vulnerability inside of us, crack ourselves open, crack our hearts open and our minds open to show people what love looks like. The same love that Jesus showed us by getting up there and doing things that made a difference, bringing people back to wholeness, giving them health, giving them food, giving them a safe place to be, listening to them, answering questions, showing compassion, showing ourselves to be servants. Servant leadership was what Jesus was about, not leadership from on high, but leadership from below. That's how we can show people Jesus. How do they see Jesus? It's in our actions. It's in how we speak. It's in how we interact. It's how we treat others, especially those who can't do anything for us. There are so many people out there who will never, ever claim to be followers of Jesus, but they are in their actions. Conversely, there's a whole lot of people out there who claim they are followers of Jesus, and their actions show us that they're not in the least interested in what Jesus was about. The people who want to learn about Jesus don't care about institutions and theologies and arguments and acceptable behaviors and acceptable looks. They care about our hearts. They care about our gratitude. They care about our service. They care about how we can show them something that is so inspirational, it keeps us going even in the worst times of our life. That's what faith is for. That's what they want to know. That's what we can show them. For us to show them Jesus is not to bring them into a church, give them a bunch of books and say, go read, and when you figured it out, come back and talk to us. That doesn't work. Guarantee they're not coming back. To understand their question, we have to make ourselves seekers as well, because we're never done. We're never finished this journey. If we are going to pay homage to the institutions instead of the justice that Jesus required of us, we've lost the point. We're here to see Jesus. That's going to be in a field. It's going to be in children's laughter. It's going to be in a conversation around a dinner table. Chances are it is not going to be in an auditorium or a church where everybody is isolating themselves from each other and they're listening to someone up front talk without any kind of conversation back and forth or any kind of questioning being allowed. Those communities, that's what's dying. People who want to know Jesus, that's growing. We have the opportunity to make that choice. When someone comes to us, whether they use the phrase or not, and says, I want to meet Jesus, how are we going to show them the Jesus that we know? Because that's all they're actually asking for us to show them who it is that helps make life make sense.